Hello, this is Stephanie.
And this is Brian.
Welcome to the making and the remaking of a codependent mind.
So we're going to pick up with a little bit of a twist on the idea of relationship tools. And we're going to talk about the tools of lying, resentment, and defensiveness.
And the twist is these three tools obviously sound a little bit different from the other tools that we've talked about. That is curiosity and empathy, which all sound great.
These have negative connotations, usually when you think about all three of these things.
Like we've talked about with codependent behaviors, the behaviors themselves are not the problem. The problem is the way they're used, the reasons why they're used, the effects the behaviors have. Things like people-pleasing, there's nothing inherently wrong with pleasing people. Caretaking, there's nothing inherently wrong with taking care of people. This is chapter 1 of the book, the ways in which the codependent versions of those behaviors are destructive to the end that they are trying to achieve, and that they don't actually take care of people and they don't actually please people ultimately. And so similarly, this is the case with tools, relationship tools. There's nothing inherent in any particular tool that makes it good or bad. It's how it is applied, how and when it is applied.
Right, exactly.
So lying, resentment, and defensiveness are all tools that really all of us have in our relationship toolboxes. And again, it's how those tools are used that make the difference and what's behind their use. So of those three tools, we're going to be talking about lying as a behavior and resentment and defensiveness as emotions, like curiosity and empathy.
Right, and then how these three really are tied together much of the time.
Well, they certainly were with you.
Yes.
So these were not just one of many tools in your relationship toolbox. These were the main tools in your relationship toolbox. These are the tools that you went back to time and time again, which is not surprising because they're really three pillars of codependency, I would say.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
Lying, resentment, defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and lying being just this sort of source behavior that I can recall using since the very beginning of my life to protect myself.
Lying is at the core of almost all the codependent behaviors that we've listed.
Right, codependency is lying. I think this would be a good time to mention the book again in chapter 1 and how we explain codependency, what it is, where it comes from, because right now this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a source codependent behavior, codependency at its infancy.
And then also chapter, I think it was 8, breaking the codependency habit.
Possibly 9.
Chapter 9, you think?
I think it was 9.
Okay, chapter 9. Book's available on Amazon, so you can check that out because chapter 9 does a very good job addressing these three pillars, three horsemen of codependency: lying, defensiveness, resentment, and how they underlie all of the other codependent behaviors. So the breaking the codependency habit has very much to do with breaking the habitual use of lying, resentment, and defensiveness in your relationships.
Which starts with even recognizing and noticing that they're there to begin with, which I had a really hard time doing. I had no idea that I lied as much as I did.
And I suspect that the reason for that is because you started it very young. Mm-hmm. So children start to lie around the age of 2. I mean, really when they start to get language and sophisticated. So almost from the beginning,
right.
Children start to lie. And I remember my youngest daughter, this isn't lying, but my youngest daughter was a very good eater when she was a toddler, like from when she started solid foods until really about the time just before 2, when she kind of realized that she could say no. That was a thing that she could do. And then she became very, very picky because she would just say no to everything.
I'm allowed to say no.
Yeah, or just that's a capacity that I have, right? So this is around the time when children start to differentiate themselves from their caretakers and the people around them. Realize that they are separate and start to try to exercise some of these powers that they're developing. And we talked about last episode that children's job, most important job, because it's all of our most important job, was to learn about themselves and the world and how to navigate that world successfully. And lying is a tool for that as well. So if you're in a threatening situation and you can lie your way out of it, that can be a pretty good tool to have in your toolbox as you navigate your life.
Right. I think we talked about this a little bit in an episode we did in season 4 about trust, where we talked about how there's the philosophy behind when is it ever acceptable to lie? Yes.
Some people say no, but that seems, if you push that out, that seems pretty nonsensical.
It's kind of a stretch, right? It's almost like just they're doing a mental exercise, but would they actually never lie?
Right. So someone comes to the door and is looking for you. And the example we use in the trust episode is a standard kind of example in moral philosophy. Someone comes to the door, some murderer comes to the door, is looking for you.
Or I think it was a friend of yours that you're protecting.
I'm personalizing. I'm protecting you.
Sure.
Someone comes to our door.
Yeah.
It's a murderer looking for you. I'm going to lie. And I feel absolutely not just that it's morally okay for me to lie, that I feel a moral imperative that I need to lie to protect you. So if I'm, if I can pull it, if I'm a good liar, then that's a benefit to you.
Yes, right.
So it is a tool, and it can be a useful skill and an appropriate skill. But the problem is if it's overused, obviously, you don't want that to be the go-to skill for children as they navigate their world. And I remember when I was a mother to young children, reading a bit of advice. If you don't want your children to lie, don't ask them questions that encourage them to lie. So an example would be if you had a very young child, say a 3-year-old, who was rambunctiously playing in the living room and knocks over a vase and breaks the vase. And maybe this was a very important vase to me, and it was my grandmother's or something, and I'm upset. I'm having a little trouble emotionally regulating. So if I go up to that child and I ask in a kind of upset voice, like, did you break the vase? The instinct, which is appropriate, is to defend themselves, for them to lie. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to get mad at them for lying about it when it's clear that I know that they did it. But if I know that they did it, do not ask them if they did it, because then they have to decide whether or not to protect themselves and lie, or to confront their scary mother and tell the truth.
Yeah.
And obviously they're going to choose to lie. So the advice was instead saying, like, I see that you broke the vase. Can you help me clean it up? Can we talk about the behavior that caused the broken vase? Yeah. So make yourself an ally in this situation and not a threat, because it's threats that produce the defense response of lying.
Right, which was exactly my case. I mean, I have very vivid memories of that being the source of my lies, being these scary situations with both of my parents, my dad with his anger, my mom with her disappointment, disapproval, my friend G in elementary school, his violent behaviors being in response to, unless I lied about, say, something he wanted, or asking about himself, or anything, really. I sensed that I had to just tell whatever lie I needed to tell to keep this situation stable.
During these years where kids start to lie and start to become better at it because they become more socially aware, between the ages of 2 to 5 or 6, most children, again, are trying out lying as a strategy for navigating the world. And you got consistent feedback that was a good strategy.
Right.
That was the right strategy to manage your mother's negative emotions, to manage your dad's negative emotions, which you saw those as threats, and then to manage the more overt threat that your friend was directing at you.
And they worked. As far as I could tell, they kept me safe. I mean, there's other ways I could have gone about keeping myself safe, but that was the one I wound up using, and it seemed to work.
These were not self-aggrandizing lies.
Right.
So you witnessed other children do those kind of lying, and you didn't see what you were doing as the same.
No, right. I mean, so through lying, all the way through, I never saw myself as a liar. It didn't register with me that telling people what they wanted to hear or things like that was lying. It didn't feel that way to me. It felt like something I had to do. I was powerless. That's something I needed to do. Therefore, it's not really a lie.
Eating your peas when you don't like peas and not saying anything.
Right.
Doesn't feel like a lie.
Yes, right. Yeah, it doesn't feel like a lie. It's just like, well, I'm expected to do this. It's not really a lie if I'm doing something that I have to do or say something that I have to say, regardless of what it is. So, but yeah, I remember plenty of people, kids throughout my life that, oh man, this guy's a liar, the pathological liar. Those being a very specific type of lie. This person is basically just making up a story about their lives that I would catch them a few hours later or a day or a week later. Oh, that's actually wasn't true at all. Why did this person make that up? That's strange. And then, so I had people that did that consistently, and I was like, that person's a liar, but not me.
You had friends who were narcissistic all the way through your childhood, and then obviously you had your narcissistic partners, and you could see, you witness many, many lies that they told, the ways their stories changed. But again, these were kind of self-aggrandizing lies. So this is the difference, I guess, between the codependency and the narcissist, right? So the narcissists their lies are directed at making themselves bigger, puffing themselves up. And so in some ways they're easier to see, right? Because especially if you're close to them over a period of time.
Or putting someone else down. There's that also, that aspect of lying. So making up things about me, or making up things about a conversation we had yesterday or something, just anything to put themselves on top. Win an argument, control.
So this is, again, very visible. But the codependency line was more along the side of disguise and pretense.
Yes.
And denials directed inward again. I'm going to not tell this person that I don't like this thing, or I'm going to pretend that I do like this thing so that they won't be angry and they'll be mad. And so that, again, that didn't feel like lying to you, the codependent line, because it was in contrast to the narcissistic line.
Mm-hmm. And really, it caused a lot of shame for me still, but it caused shame that I was betraying myself, if anything. I didn't really necessarily see it as I'm harming anyone else. Wasn't really consciously thinking about this, but I would have shame reactions to it.
From the betrayal of yourself, from the pretense.
Yes.
Because it still would feel like a pretense. And so, again, starting in childhood, but all the way up, particularly in your abusive relationships, these tools worked. The tool of lying worked.
Right. It worked. Yeah. It worked for the function that I was intending it to work for, which is keep things status quo, keep things as even keel and safe for myself as possible.
So it's stabilized. Lying can stabilize toxic relationships.
Yeah, it does a really great job at that. For one thing, the abusive people in these toxic relationships, they want that in a way. Mm-hmm. It helps them a lot, right? Because these people are disordered also, just in a different way, almost in a yin-yang kind of way. And I'm creating a lot less work for them. They don't have to jump through as many hoops to convince themselves that they're, of their grandeur or anything. If I'm just going to tell them that they're correct about all of that. Yes, you are. You are the best. You are the smartest. Yes, I am terrible. Yes, it's like, okay, great. Wow. That was easy.
So in these relationships with your parents, with your abusive friend, with your narcissistic friends, with your narcissistic abusive romantic partners, there were different kinds of lies. There were the lies in response to actual threatening behavior that you experienced in most of those relationships, like direct threats. You would lie in response, and that would work.
Yeah.
As you were just saying, there were lies about them that you told to them and to others in service of their needs and desires.
Which I knew would also keep me safe.
Right. Lying to help them uphold their fragile self-images or help them manage their emotions that they couldn't manage on their own.
Mm-hmm. Or of our relationship, either of them and their image or of the nature of our relationship. And if they had a narrative about it, oh, we have great communication. Yes, we do. You're correct. There were also lies about me.
And you told those lies both to those people and to others as well.
Right. That I agreed to things, that I liked them, that I was enjoying the relationship. I was enjoying what we were doing. This whole package of just, yes, this is great. This is what I want. Selling this to everyone else. Yes, this is a legitimate relationship.
And then lying about what you needed or wanted, and often lying about really who you were to them and to others to stabilize that primary relationship.
Yeah, I really like that image of stabilizing. That seems to be, that's like the main reason for all of it, right? Just stabilize this situation. I can't handle anything more difficult than what's going on right now. The final one being the lies to myself. So the cleanup, or that telling myself stories, compartmentalizing what happens as it happens or afterwards, lying to clean up what actually happened, clean up the fact that I had a different emotion there than I'm telling myself that I had. So someone says someone abuses me, someone yells at me or whatever, I'm telling myself, oh no, I deserved that. That was appropriate. Yeah, I brought that on, whatever it was, whatever I needed to do to make myself go, okay, that was fine. I can sweep that under the rug.
Or someone would be taking advantage of you in a somewhat obvious way to other people. And so you tell lies that were essentially just rationalizations, just kind of made up after the fact about why this was happening. Oh, I'm fine with the fact that, say, Jay doesn't do any work and outside the home and doesn't do any work inside the home. But you rationalize that, that's just what, partners do.
And so this was a whole system, right? These all worked together. So these lies that I told the partners, for instance, in the toxic relationships, I would then have to go and make sure I really bought those lies too. So that's when all the rationalization comes out. And then it makes it easier for me to continue to tell that lie in the future, back to them or to whoever else I need to tell it to. And, we've talked about things like shame venting, where that's kind of just my emotional system still going like, nope, those are lies. But so then I just blurt out a lie just because I need to try this out again. I need to test this out again. I need you to go, yes, that sounds legitimate.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, isn't that the advice if you want to beat a lie detector, is just to convince yourself that the lie is true?
Oh, yeah, right. God, I would probably have done pretty well with that. Huh. Yeah.
So, like we're saying, lying worked to stabilize these relationships. It kept you relatively safe in that situation.
Right.
And it also, the lying to yourself, as you were just saying, was designed to keep you safe from the shame. But then when it didn't do enough, when the line didn't work completely, then you kind of picked up your resentment tool.
Yes, which was, looking back, a very thick layer of resentment there almost all the time, right? Because so it followed most of the lying. Once I felt the shame of the betrayal.
The betrayal of yourself.
Betraying myself. Once I felt that betrayal, I had to equalize that shame because I couldn't really sit in it long enough. And there's only so many tools that I had to get through shame or to forget about shame or compartmentalize it. And it's a very powerless feeling to not be able to resolve shame.
It's the ultimately powerless feeling. It's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. So resentment, I found, obviously not consciously, was a tool to get through that. The resentment diminished the impact of the shame, and it gave me some artificial power in my head where I otherwise didn't have any power. Because I didn't feel as though I had any power in the relationship or over the other person. But if I at least in my head go, well, that person's wrong. I know they're wrong. And I'm just going to carry that. That's the best I can do.
And we said this a lot. Resentment is the anger of the powerless.
Yes.
Anger is an animating emotion. Resentment less so, but it's still uncomfortable.
Right. And it can be
pleasurable.
Animating.
Yeah. So it has that. It does have some animating features. And what would it animate you to do?
Well, if I ever had to basically act on my resentment, it would come out as defensiveness, because there's the third wave, right? The only thing I had then, say if someone backed me into the corner or I had to explain something that, say it was obvious that I was resentful or I didn't agree with something, and then it's defensiveness. No, you're wrong.
There were periods where you would complain, especially about the J relationship. The resentment, as you were just saying, was more at the surface. Other people would see it and start to question it, and you would fall into defensiveness, which would involve more lies.
Yes, right. Yeah, and then that closes the loop, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're back at the beginning again. It's this way of lying to get around the lies, but then there's these two emotions in the middle that I'm not really resolving at all. So I'm not looking at the resentment. I'm just feeling it because it's the only thing my system is able to handle. And it's animated only to the extent if, like you said, someone makes me take some sort of action on it, and then I get flustered, and then the resentment explodes basically into defensiveness. Yeah. And then it's a lie to cover up the lie.
So these are how you use the tools in all your previous relationships. Mm-hmm. And again, they worked, quote unquote, insofar as they stabilized relationships which you shouldn't actually have been in. But you brought that toolkit into our relationship as well. And as we're describing it, these were very important tools for you in response to relational threats. So I was not a relational threat, but relationships themselves and emotions were threatening to you. So that you were still picking them up and trying to use them in our relationship.
And I had the same behavior because I didn't have that big of a toolkit. These three things were really all that was the main thing I had. So And the threats in our case, a lot of times would just be, I'm faced with reality, right? You're trying to get an answer on something, and I'm getting all flustered because, so I go straight to that defensiveness, and then I'm resenting you for making me feel shame. And I'm not, again, in our early days, I wasn't aware of any of this. So I just get bubbled up and overtaken with shame, and I'm blaming you for it.
There was resentment and defensiveness for sure, but there was also a lot of lying. And we've talked about this before. You mentioned the trust episode, but I wanted to talk about it again, in part because you've referenced the ways in which I had been hurt in our relationship, obviously, especially early on when we didn't understand any of this. And, sometimes it's just been vague about what that meant. But the biggest source of hurt and betrayal was the lying. There was a lot of lying, and a lot of those lies hurt me directly. A lot of the lies led to betrayals of me and of our relationship that were very wounding to me. So I think we both wanted to revisit the subject of lying, because I think so many codependent people use it in their relationships. They may be using it, as you did, kind of unconsciously, habitually, right. Or even if it is somewhat consciously, thinking they are doing it for the benefit of the relationship.
Yes, right.
That they are denying their wants and needs, that they are pretending to like something or to appreciate something or to not be distressed for the good of the relationship. And it was so destructive in our relationship in big and small ways. And pervasive too. So we'll just mention, say, a couple ones.
Mm-hmm. One example I can think of is during our early days, when Jay still had some access to me. I was going through the end of the relationship, and she started to involve you in various ways. And
she wanted to extend her control of you to me.
Right.
I mean, she wants to control the whole ecosystem.
Yes, and I was having a really hard time with that, obviously, because I had a hard time dealing with her. And so I was unable to protect myself, and it was starting to become clear that I was unable to protect you also. But not only that, in this particular case, she was in her kind of usual angry, shouting, abusive sort of manner, telling me to convey something to you, some kind of expectation. We're not getting into details of it. And I felt I had to do it. I remember at the time, there was this kind of double wave of this doesn't seem appropriate to me. But what outweighed it was the anger, that she was expressing. This is, wow, I really need to do this. Yeah, I remember feeling this overwhelming sense that I had to do this to satisfy this anger that she was displaying. Just that what I did throughout that entire...
Standard trauma bond response. Yep.
Right. And so I'm not thinking about you at all. I'm just triggered, and I need to do this, and I guess I have no choice. And I'm coming to you and nervously presenting this controlling thing that she wants me to do on you, and you recognize it immediately as inappropriate and controlling. It seems like she's trying to control me and us with this. This is really inappropriate. And I'm like, now I'm faced with you and your dissatisfaction or disapproval. So then we're having this exchange by text, and there's a pause, and I'm like, wow, okay, this didn't go well. What do I need to do now to diffuse that? Not try to repair it, but diffuse it. I need to make sure you're not angry. So the best I can come up with was a complete lie. Oh, Jay was being respectful. She was being very respectful. I think this is all just a misunderstanding. More or less, that's kind of what I was trying to convey, was just like, I think this is, I think we just, she didn't quite know what she was asking. I didn't quite present it correctly. She was being totally respectful. This is me, sorry, let's forget about it. I tried to get out of it with a very deliberate lie that when we look back at the text, I was because I had rewritten the story, but going back and seeing like, wow, there was a real-time lie, because I knew for sure that she was not being respectful.
Right.
Of you, of me, of anything.
But it didn't register. I mean, even if that one was more fully conscious than many, it didn't really even register.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't remember. You didn't carry it forward and make sure, like, which many of us do. Because lying is an emotional and mental burden. You have to keep track of it. Right? But you did it so often. And so even if it was unconsciously, that you didn't carry it as a lie.
Yeah, right. It was so interesting, though, to see that gap in the text. It was like maybe a 5-minute gap Just like, I'm like, oh, I need to do something here. I need to lie.
And then there's another one that was maybe a little less conscious and kind of just more habitual. This is how you navigate most interpersonal situations, where we had an opportunity to hang out one night during a time where there weren't a lot of opportunities for us to do that. And I invited you over, but you said that you had made plans with another friend of yours, a woman, which is fine. She really wanted to go to a party, and you had told her that you would go with her to that party. And I was like, sure, fair enough. It's too bad. It would be nice to have this time together when we didn't have much time. Then over the course, I don't know, I can't remember exactly the timing of it, but
maybe a week.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah. And so I guess it came up again that maybe you even brought it up. You felt bad that you couldn't get together, but you really wanted to go to this party because you had promised her you would do so. But then at some point, like a week before the party, she decides she doesn't want to go and suggests you guys could just hang out. This is all stuff I learned later,
right?
Because during that week, after she tells you she doesn't really want to go to the party and maybe you guys could just hang out, and you're like, sure. During that week, you pretend as if you're still going to the party.
Yes, because that seemed like I had this weird back and forth. This is something I can go back and place, right? It's like I felt caught between I was going to disappoint someone. Somehow I felt as though if you found out that I wasn't going to the party and just hanging out with this person instead of hanging out with you in a time, like you said, that where it was a little difficult for us to get together. But I didn't want to disappoint the other person and say, well, then let's not hang out at all. So I just told them, okay, yeah, sure. That sounds good. Yes, let's just hang out and do something else. But I'm continuing to tell you I'm going to this party because that was a better excuse for not getting together with you.
Yes. And then so on the day of the party, I actually went to the lists because I had been invited, but I wasn't going, and saw that both of you had changed your RSVP earlier in the week to no, even though during the course of the week you were saying to me that you were going. And then the morning of the party, you sent me some text like, oh, we decided, as if
like
it was
just decided.
Yeah, as if it would just happen that you
right.
just decided that you weren't going. So then I have this situation is like, why is he lying to me?
Mm-hmm.
Then this situation, which would have been fine. I mean, yeah, so I would have been disappointed, but I wouldn't have been angry. I mean, I was just disappointed that I couldn't hang out with you, but not, right. It wasn't your problem that I was disappointed. You had made other plans and a commitment to someone else. And I respect that. But then it made me feel terrible. Supposedly you were lying in order to make me feel better. So I wouldn't feel disappointed or that you were choosing someone over me. But instead, what it made me feel is terrible because you're lying to me for reasons I don't understand. Right. Like, is there something going on with this other person that I don't know about? Mm-hmm. Is there something wrong? Like, why do you think this is something that you need to lie to me about? What type of person do you think I am that I couldn't handle this?
Right. Well, to me, in my codependency, no one could handle anything, right?
Yes. Everyone's a threat.
Everyone's a threat.
Every bad emotion's a threat.
Yeah. So potentially disappointing someone is just a red alert for me. It's no different than potentially angering someone or because of just all this experience I had of these things actually having pretty terrible consequences when I did disappoint someone or anger someone. And so, yeah, it's just like, well, this is how I need to approach every single interpersonal situation in my entire life. But again, as we've said before, it wasn't even necessary for me to respond to the abusive people that way either, because all that did was just keep me stuck in those relationships. But here I'm applying it to this new person, you. She's not going to be able to handle the disappointment. But then also, when I thought back on it too, also I was like, well, this person not wanting to go to the party actually did make me want to cancel with that person and hang out with you. But I was also not doing that because I didn't want to disappoint the other person. So it was, well, I have to keep the plans with this person. So it's just this big ball of flustered lying.
And resentment and defensiveness that comes from that.
Yes, right.
As if it's the other person's fault that you had to lie.
Right, exactly.
Or when you're called out on the lie. Well, I was just doing it for you.
Right. Yeah, I didn't want to disappoint you. Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, right. Thank you for protecting my feelings when I didn't ask you to do that. When in fact, what I asked you for is the truth. So again, we had a trust episode where we talked about how this line in particular, but the resentment, as we're saying in defensiveness, go along with it, was destructive to our relationship and is destructive. And I'll link to that episode in the show notes if you want a refresher. But just to reiterate, it and to put it in the context of the season, we're talking about tools that help us do the relationship work that we think is conducive to producing a healthy, sustaining, loving relationship. Because there's a lot of relationship work you can do. You did a lot of relationship work, as we're saying.
The lying was relationship work.
But the relationship work we're interested in doing is work in 3 categories, as we've said. Knowing ourselves and each other. Obviously, clearly, lying does not help us know each other. It's exactly counterproductive to that.
Exact opposite of that.
Exact opposite. It's destructive to knowing each other. And to the extent that you lie to yourself, it's destructive to knowing yourself. Mm-hmm. In terms of staying connected, which is the other category of work that we do, it creates distance, as does resentment and defensiveness. Those are all tools to create distance. And that's fine if what you're getting distance from is an actual threat. They can create physical distance, but they certainly create mental and emotional distance from the other person. And then the other category of work being strengthening partnership. And that's where the betrayal comes in that lying is a direct betrayal of the partnership. And you hear, people who experience, say, sexual infidelity, that it's almost worse that they were lied to. I mean, it was bad, obviously, to think of their partner having sex with someone else, but the lying to cover that up. Because the lying denies the other person of information about their world. And like we were talking about in previous episodes, information is like the engine of evolution. It's what we're doing. It's the job of children. It's the job of all of us. We go out, we're born into this world, and we need to, as quickly as possible, get the information that we need to navigate the world safely, and then to also construct a happy, meaningful life for ourselves. And what partners can do, and what our partnership does now, is we help each other get that information. We help each other learn about our worlds, learn about each other, learn about ourselves, so we have more material in which to construct a happy, meaningful life. And when you lie to your partner, you are denying them information, denying them the material they need to make the choices they need to make in order to have a happy, meaningful life. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty big betrayal of a partnership. You're actively working against them, because lying is about threat management. It is not about partnership.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is useful, but this is making me think about when I've heard people talk about lies that they've told in a relationship as being necessary because, if I told you this, then you likely would have reacted this way and our relationship would have been over. So I had to withhold this. I had to tell this lie, which is an interesting signal though, right? The fact that, first of all, you're making this unilateral decision that the other person's somehow not going to be able to handle this.
Yeah, you're denying them information and then the opportunity to make their own choice about what that information means.
You're robbing them of a choice here by telling this lie. And now they're just going forward based on something that's not true at all. And it's not true, but somehow you're okay with that because that's better than whatever you think is going to happen if you were to tell them the truth, and they're going to get upset and then they're going to make some decision that you don't like.
This goes along with codependent control. How a codependent's controlling? Well, that's in some ways controlling because you're trying to control the outcome of a situation. So rather than telling me, say, that you feel that you're doing more of the domestic labor, hopefully you wouldn't, but you did in the past, you would lie about your feelings. You would say, no, I'm fine with doing more, rationalizing it by X, X, and X. I wanted a bigger place, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And then you would just feel resentment. Mm-hmm. So if it would happen between us, you could potentially lie to me that you're fine with the way we divide up our domestic labor, but then you'd be sitting there day in, day out, silently resenting me. So now I have a relationship with someone who resents. I don't want to be resented. I don't want to move through my life with someone who's resented me.
Yeah.
I'd much rather figure out a way that we both feel fine about the labor that we're doing. But you're trying to control the outcome off the top and then just getting power over me because now you're doing more. You get to resent me.
Right. But then that also doesn't work for me because that's not a pleasant emotion to have unresolved and carry. And there's shame that goes with that because, obviously my system knows that this is inappropriate.
Yeah. So, I think lying has really no productive place in intimate relationships, which is not to say it's never going to happen between, like I'm sure, occasionally we both might slip up and tell a lie. And it also is not to say, and this is really important, that does not mean full disclosure. You don't owe me and I don't owe you full disclosure of every intimate moment or private thoughts or impulse that
Right.
each of us have. There's definitely a difference between keeping things private, which you're allowed to do, and withholding critical information.
Right. That's the difference.
And you'll feel the difference. So, for instance, you didn't mention to me your problems with alcohol.
Until much later.
Until much later.
Until much later, right.
You didn't say you went to AA twice. And I didn't receive that as a lie. It was something that you had a lot of shame for. It was something that you had disclosed to past partners and been abused and manipulated around. However, if I had gone into the relationship saying to you, say, I've been with alcoholics in my past, maybe one of my parents was alcoholic, I really don't think I'm capable of being in a relationship with someone who has a problem with alcohol right now. What is your past with alcohol? If you lied to me and didn't tell me, that's a different story.
Yes.
In that case, you are, again, withholding meaningful information that I feel I need to have a healthy, happy, safe relationship.
Right. That said, though, with this particular instance, it felt to me a little bit like a lie, only because of how long I took to tell you and the feelings that went along with that. So then I would be telling stories and I'd be having to kind of alter them a little bit, wash them down, when it would have been a lot more useful and easy for me to tell the full real story of it.
Well, and because you didn't consciously make the choice. So that's the ideal.
Right.
You are absolutely allowed to keep things private, but you should do so in order to keep them private, in order to say, this is something maybe that's unresolved. This is something maybe I feel shame about. This is something I'm not ready to tell my partner. Mm-hmm. But that's not what was happening with
right.
you. You were like, I don't want to tell her because it got me.
This has
gotten in trouble before.
Yes.
And it might get in trouble now.
Yep.
So if I had asked, you may have lied. Because as you're saying, you were kind of lying. It wasn't just about keeping it private. It was about withholding it from me.
Right. Because I'm afraid you're going to react somehow.
Yeah. Right. But again, full disclosure isn't the same as not lying, but lying itself, that act, whether it's deliberate untruth or pretense or withholding, is almost always destructive in intimate relationships. Similarly with resentment and defensiveness. But we're not arguing to throw them out because they're just tools in the toolbox.
Yeah. We don't want to throw emotions out.
Yeah. So for instance, resentment and defensiveness, we don't want to throw them out because we don't want to throw any emotions out. Right. And we don't want to throw lying out as well, because there are very rare situations where it actually, if you do it consciously and deliberately for reasons that do protect your partner from an external threat, right? Like, so she can be in the relationship tool, in your general relationship toolkit. But if any of those three things come up in your intimate partnership consistently, that's important evidence that something's amiss with that partnership.
Right. And that's where they become a different kind of tool. It's a signal. For me, it's a signal of powerlessness.
And this is what you talk about extensively in chapter 9. What do we say? Chapter 9 of
I think
the book?
chapter 9, yeah.
We're going to kick this to the next episode on how to interpret those signals.
Yes.
The signals of resentment, defensiveness, and the impulse to lie. Again, you cover them in chapter 9, and we're going to talk about them more extensively in the next episode.
Of ways to be able to figure out, am I being codependent?
This is a question that people have asked you, that we see come up, say, in codependency discussion boards, because again, the behavior itself, you can't figure it out solely on the behavior. So what is the evidence? Was this codependency or was it X?
And we hope you join us for that discussion
In a couple weeks.